Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. And on this week's show, we have three fights to break down: UFC 184, Invicta FC 11, and of course Bellator 134, the British Invasion. We also have quite a few headlines to go over, mainly involving the Ultimate Fighter, and of course there is a host of Bellator news that we have to discuss as well on this week's all-new Beyond the Cage. As I mentioned, I am Jim Gramm. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
Good. Went to work yesterday. Made a little extra money. So that's
Were you
good.
not supposed to work yesterday, or was it a holiday? Or?
I was not supposed to work yesterday. Supposed to just relax at home.
Okay.
And just for those that are curious, Jim, I want to say this. And still. See my shirt?
Yeah.
Okay.
How could I
Send it
not
up.
see it?
That?
I said, how could I miss it? You panned the camera on.
So, no.
Yeah, that's also just let people know we were not wearing matching T-shirts. If anyone was wondering, this is just a black T-shirt. It's from the Louis C.K. collection. So.
Ooh. That sounds expensive.
I made that up. If anyone watches the comedian Louis C.K., he almost always just wears a black T-shirt when he does his stand-up. So.
Nice.
I think I got this at Walmart. I don't know.
There's quite a bit of fight announcements and all sorts of stuff that UFC's been popping out. I guess there's a Reebok press conference going on right now. All sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's start first here with the Ultimate Fighter because I want to get on that. 2 seasons of the Ultimate Fighter have been announced upcoming this year in 2015. We have the Ultimate Fighter Latin America Season 2, and also here on U.S. television we will have the Ultimate Fighter 21. And we kind of talked about this, I think, a couple months ago, Dave, rumored to be a gym season, which means you will have 2 of the MMA gyms or teams, however you want to phrase it, competing against each other, which has never been done before. And the 2 camps are the Black Zillions and American Top Team, which are both located in Florida, around the Boca Raton area. And for those of the people who don't know, Black Zillions was kind of started out of American Top Team by a couple of the coaches and the fighters, and then they kind of got after they started, they got a lot of big-time fighters joining. I think Rashad Evans was really one of the first real big fighters to go down there and join the Black Zillions when he left Jackson's Grudge there in Albuquerque and Denver. And since then, a whole host of fighters have come through the Black Zillions, including Eddie Alvarez, Alistair Overeem, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Michael Johnson, and Abel Trujillo, MMA/kickboxer Tyrone Spong. I believe Matt Mitrione's done some training at the Black Zillions. So they have become a pretty formidable gym here since their inception in 2011. And of course, American Top Team really just about within the last 10-15 years, Dave, has been one of the top 10 gyms in all of the world, and they just keep seeming to get better as they finally added a UFC champion to their roster in Robbie Lawler. Glover Teixeira now trains there. They also have Tisha Torres, Mike Brown, Dustin Poirier, probably Thiago Alves, Hector Lombard. I'm probably missing people because they have so many. I know Cole Miller's there, but it should be a fun season, I think, and a very interesting concept. And I think, when we said, Dave, if the Ultimate Fighter was going to do something different if it was going to continue, they had to do something different to draw in fan interest. And I think this is actually a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, anything to spice it up is a good thing. It'll be interesting as more details come out about, the logistics of everything. From what I understand, if a team wins, the fights will take place either at the Black Zillions or at ATT. They'll go back and forth depending on who has control. And they said something about everybody weighs in and then the fights are picked or something like that.
Yeah, according to an article I found on MMA Junkie, the season again will debut April 22nd on Fox Sports 1. The team will earn a trophy, and also the team, which I hope is split amongst the members of the team, earn $500,000. Looking at American Top Team, they will have fighters Steve Montgomery, Ursos Jursic, Sabab Hamasi, Hader Hassan, Michael Graves, Nathan Coy, and I think a lot of people's early pick here to win this season, Dave, Steve Carl, former World Series of Fighting champion, and then Marcela Afalia. And the Black Zillions have Valdir Araújo, who's also a very highly touted prospect, Carrington Banks, Louis Busby, Jason Jackson, Vicente Luque, Andrews Nakahara, Felipe Porto, and Kamaruddin Usman. And those are all welterweights. And, yeah, as you mentioned, Dave, it will kind of take place between both gyms in terms of filming. It will not be filmed at the UFC compound there in Las Vegas. And I guess they're just 20 minutes apart, the two gyms there in South Florida. So all the fighters on the respective camp teams will live and train together, but yeah, the fights are going to kind of go back and forth between there. And like you said, they won't find up their matchups until after the weigh-ins, which I don't know. I think this is going to be filmed in advance, so I guess that doesn't really matter for terms of us, the viewers. But for the fighters, I think that's a little weird. So that means like everyone's going to weigh in each week, and then they're going to find out the matchups, because how else would you do that if you don't know who's fighting yet?
Right.
That's what doesn't make sense to me.
They gotta add a little bit of twist that makes no sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the Ultimate Fighter.
Because that means everyone has to be on weight every single week.
Which isn't the worst thing.
It isn't, but regardless of what level you're at, whether you're world champion or not, that's pretty taxing on your body.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think you should have to go through that often. So I don't know if that's going to be tweaked or what, or maybe they already know the matchups, or maybe there's like just a group of guys that have to weigh in, like like 4 or 5 or something, and then they go, all right, you 5 might be fighting, so it's not all 16 guys every single time.
Right.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't have to be all 16 guys, because obviously if you lost, you wouldn't have to weigh in.
Right, and it's going to go down.
Obviously, the guy who just won, right? But you know what I mean, though. That first week, though, that means everyone would have to weigh in.
Maybe they're going to do that because that first week, maybe they're all already on the show, and that's to make sure that they're ready. That they don't come in thinking, "Oh, I got a week to prepare," type of thing. Because they're not going to fight to get into the house; they're already in.
Right. Well, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see. Interesting concept, and I think it should be a good season.
Ironically, if you go back and look at some of the names on there, that Nate Coy was he was the MFC welterweight champion. He won a fight at the Hoosier Fight Club that I always talk about. He fought for Strikeforce, Bellator, and the MFC. So that's my my underground pick, because he's been around for quite a while. So this is a big chance.
Yeah, like I said, there's going to be some good talent. Like I said, I think a lot of people will see Steve Carl, because he had some pretty good success with World Series of Fighting. I'm sure he'll be a lot of people's early pick to win. But yeah, let's move on to the other Ultimate Fighter announcement. This one I'm less excited for, very much so. And that's not just because it won't be on TV here in the U.S., this being the Ultimate Fighter Latin America 2. It's the coaches. I think you can make a case, Dave, that these are probably the 2 worst coaches selected for an Ultimate Fighter season. I think this maybe goes up there with the... no offense to any of these guys, Ross Pearson, George Soteropoulos, and then you also have Kyle Noak against Patrick Cote. I think that kind of goes up there with coaches no one's really hyped to see. And not only that, these coaches will not fight because they're not even close to the same weight class. And as Kelvin Gastelum will coach a squad against Efrain Escudero. And Escudero, last time I checked, fights at 155, and Gastelum used to fight at 170, is now being forced to fight at 185. So there's no way these 2 gentlemen will coach. Gastelum, I'm trying to see who's technically coaching which team, because Escudero is actually from Mexico. Gastelum is of Mexican descent, but is from Arizona. Yeah, Escudero will take on the team Mexico, and Gastelum will coach, kind of like the rest of Latin America, which is what Fabricio Verdum did last year. So that's kind of where the coaches. I know both speak Spanish, so that shouldn't be a problem for either gentleman. But I think without that allure of the coaches fighting, Dave, the fact that these are two lesser-known fighters, regardless of them both being former Ultimate Fighter champions, I'm not sure if that many people are going to be tuning in to the Fight Pass to be watching this one.
Yeah, Kelvin Gastelum's 23. He might be the youngest person on the set.
Yeah, and he might even be younger than, or he might. There might be guys on his team that are older than him.
Yeah,
that he's coaching.
But I mean, I guess it's you've been to the top before. You've been you know what it takes to get there. Give them pointers or whatnot. Yeah, it's definitely not pretty. It's not something that you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to check it out when it's on Fight Pass. But yeah, it's not all that exciting.
Yeah, it's not exciting, especially again. So the UFC has Kelvin Gastelum miss weight again. So they're like, you know what, Kelvin, you have to move up a weight class. So they're basically forcing him, which to me is a negative for Kelvin. The UFC telling you no longer can fight, at that weight class. But then they somehow, to me, it's kind of a reward because his name's there. He's in the news. He's probably gets some extra bonus. But here, Kelvin, on the other hand, why don't you coach the Ultimate Fighter? I don't get how that works out. You know what I mean? And a guy I think would have made this season exciting. Maybe they could have met at 145 somehow. What about Eric Perez?
It's a good one. Speaking of Eric Perez,
I know he's a young guy too, but maybe him and Escudero could have met at 145. See, that's a lot more reasonable because, obviously they're not going to have him fight at 170. And there's no way Escudero is going to move up to take on Gastelum. He would just be ridiculously outsized. I think Eric Perez would have been a nice touch.
You mean this Eric Perez?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Or maybe a guy, some notoriety here, maybe not specifically against Escudero, but maybe a Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
Would have been a nice touch. And obviously since, they're having one coach kind of represent Team Mexico and the other one kind of represent, the rest of Latin America, to me that coach in the last season, again, was Fabricio Verdum, not, Brazilian, not even from Latin America. You can pretty much have whatever coach you want, in my opinion. So I think you could have pit Tony Ferguson up against, someone just up and coming in the 155 division, and I think that would have been a nice touch.
Yeah. Like I said before, it's a pretty strange pick.
Oh, I just thought of it. You could have had Tony Ferguson, Diego Sanchez.
Winner.
Am I right? You have the former Ultimate Fighter winner in Tony Ferguson, former Ultimate Fighter winner in Diego Sanchez, both, embraced by the Latin community.
Diego Sanchez broke his shoulder in half or whatever. Otherwise, it's a perfect pick.
Well, how many times have the coaches' fights been delayed?
Oh, that's true. But I was trying to make a great segue. I said, speaking of ridiculous picks for coaches.
Oh.
Speaking of ridiculous.
Yeah, let's get to Bellator here as we transition.
No. Oh man, you ruined it. Real quick.
Bring it up. Bring up this ridiculousness.
There is a person that is on a 6-fight winning streak, climbing the ranks of the welterweight division. Neil Magny, just finishing fools. 6 fights in a row he wins, 5 in a calendar year. UFC.com comes out and says Neil Magny is on the Thrilla in Manila card against, wait for it, Han Gi Lim.
I like Lim. I think it's a good fight, but I think Magny has deserved someone higher.
This guy, this Magny fella, in his time in the UFC, has fought in California, Brazil, Kentucky, New Jersey, Ohio, New Zealand, Oklahoma, Brazil, Colorado, and now he's got to go to Manila. I'm sure he loves the travel. I'm sure his flyer miles are through the roof. But this guy can't, like, he's got to go all the way to the Philippines to fight a guy that's from near there again, and it's somebody who is below him in the rankings. Unless he's just trying to stay busy, I don't get it.
Well, I will put it this way. Lim is a lot better fighter than Kitimoto. Lim is actually, to me, a legit threat. This guy is an absolute beast. I mean, he is huge. That is a big dude. So Lim is actually a threat. It's going to be a close fight. But like I said, I think his 6 wins in a row have earned him something higher. But maybe he really wanted to fight in the Philippines. I don't know. Yeah, and Lim was there, so they threw him that fight. But that card is really coming together. Obviously, Faber and Frankie Edgar are going to be the main event, but they just added Costa Falopu against Gegard Mousasi to that as well. So Uriah Hall's on there as well?
No, Uriah Hall was not happy.
Oh, no. When I saw it, I was kind of like, so Mousasi beats Dan Henderson, knocks him out in first round, and he gets Costa Falopu coming off a loss and an injury.
Yeah.
I would have liked the Uriah Hall Falopu matchup better, and then honestly, I would have liked a Gegard Tim Kennedy matchup.
It's not a bad one. Our friend Alex White's on that card too.
That's cool. We'll have to get him back on the show coming up. Speaking of coming up, we're trying to get Darren Cruikshank here pretty soon up ahead of his fight. He's fighting on the undercard UFC 185 against Beneil Dariush. Yeah, so look out for that post there talking to Darren about that fight.
Yeah, if any of our friends that are listening happen to run into Neil Magny, I know he's in the Chicagoland area, tell him to respond to his Facebook message. Appreciate it.
Yes, we're also trying to get Neil Magny on the program as well. So, little news. Anyway, speaking of ridiculous, we're talking about Bellator for a second. They had just announced for this summer in St. Louis, Missouri, Ken Shamrock against Kimbo Slice, which fans may remember. This was supposed to be the main event of an Elite XC show 8 years ago on CBS television, but due to a last or late-minute cut to the face of Ken Shamrock while warming up for this fight, they pulled undercard fighter, the silverback, Seth Petrozelli, in to take on Kimbo Slice. Seth Petrozelli knocks out Kimbo Slice in the first round, and more or less that was the end of Elite XC, and a lot of those fighters went on and was purchased and went to Strikeforce. But now Bellator is trying this fight again, as I said, about 8 years later. Kimbo Slice are now in his 40s. Ken Shamrock is in his 50s. I'm obviously St. Louis in the state of Missouri doesn't really care about the age of these men because they're granting them sanctions to fight in their state, but there are probably very few states that I think that would sanction this fight, Dave. Nevada probably told them, hell no, because this is just ridiculous. I understand those guys are names, but I don't know. I think this is a bad idea for Bellator. I think this is the promoting their brand the wrong way.
I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, like I heard some people arguing, I think it was Bellator's lightweight champ, Will Brooks. He's their champ still, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no one knows about them, though.
You know, he said that this is good for business, that, you know, he wants to fight on that card because people are going to tune in to watch it. Yeah, but if people tune in, they're going to tune in for the train wreck. They're not going. I don't think people will tune in and stay tuned in to watch Will Brooks fight. They should. Will Brooks is an entertaining fighter, but they won't. They're going to tune in for the train wreck and the train wreck only. And you're going about it the wrong way. Like, I'm sure we'll go into Bellator, this week's Bellator soon, but you know, I don't know what it says to have Fedor in the cage congratulating the winner of the main event. Like, like that doesn't improve your brand any. Like let the action inside the cage improve your brand, and Ken Shamrock and Kimbo Slice isn't going to do that. It's going to get your name out there on ESPN and all that kind of stuff, but that's it.
Now, I could see bringing Fedor back. I kind of get that.
But he never fought in Bellator.
Right, but I mean bringing him back to MMA and promoting him. I can get that, but I don't get Kimbo Slice against Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, me either.
See, that's the thing. People, I think, would be legitimately interested in Fedor returning. I don't think that many people are legitimately interested in seeing Ken Shamrock and Kimbo Slice returning.
I agree.
So, continuing on with Bellator, they file a lawsuit against one Mr. Rampage Jackson ahead of his UFC return at UFC 186 coming up in April. We've kind of gone over the issue a couple times. It looks as though Rampage and the UFC are in the clear, according to everything, but Bellator is still suing. Once again, I think because of the contract Rampage originally signed with Bellator, which again was not an exclusive Bellator fight contract, and more or less like a Viacom media talent contract, I think kind of that loophole gets them out. I guess we'll see. But to me, this is not going to be, even though it's been filed, I highly doubt they're going to somehow grant an injunction in time to stop Rampage from fighting at UFC 186. It may end up happening where he doesn't fight in the UFC anymore, but just the way the legal system works and having things done quickly, I don't see it being done quick enough to not have him fight in April.
Yeah, if you're Bellator, why wait to file this until Rampage fight gets announced? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, this should have been filed as soon as they heard he was going to the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, if there's legal, excuse me, if they have legal avenues to pursue, as soon as he went to the UFC, they should have filed it. And I don't think Scott Coker hates Rampage. I don't think Rampage hates Scott Coker. And if there's legal avenues to pursue them. And let's just say that some sort of injunction gets put in place. Now Rampage isn't making money because of and he's not fighting for Bellator. And I mean, kind of a D move if you ask me.
And also, Rampage has already shown his disinterest with Bellator. That's why he sought to go back to the UFC. So let's say, regardless whether Rampage fights at UFC 186 or not, let's say this lawsuit wins, and he then has to either return to Bellator or sit out for the sidelines longer. He's not going to fight for Bellator again. It's not going to do you any good. He's going to wait until he's no longer technically under Bellator contract, and then he's going to go right back to the UFC. So really, Bellator doing this does not really stop anything, because it's not going to... If Bellator wins, do you think Rampage is then going to go, well, I guess I'll fight for Bellator now?
Yeah.
When Rampage makes up his mind, that's what he does. When Dana White didn't want him to go film the A-Team, what did he do? He went and filmed the A-Team. You know what I mean? If Rampage wants to do something, he's going to do it. And if he doesn't want to do something like fight in Bellator, he's not going to do it. And especially at this stage in his career where he only has a couple fights left anyway, he wants to fight the best that he can get. And I think he's going to return to the UFC regardless of the outcome of this lawsuit.
Yeah, he'll be in the octagon before he's in the circle.
All right, well, let's actually take place what looked in that circle cage of Bellator at Bellator 134, dubbed the British Invasion. Before we get to the fights, Dave, yes?
No, I think you were going to hit on it, but when I tune into Spike, start the fights, the national anthems and stuff, and the fireworks and the team and all that kind of stuff. That's to me, that's stuff for amateur fights. That's stuff for low-level pro promotions. I don't want to see that. I don't believe, like, half of those guys that are like on the British team probably train in Florida. You know what I mean? Like, I understand what you were trying to do, the British invasion. Like I get it, but don't do all that stuff. I was already mad 15 minutes into the show.
Okay, that's just actually what I was gonna ask you on before you jumped in, but yeah,
Sorry.
I wasn't opposed to it. I thought it was kind of neat. What I would have liked was quicker pacing after that, because the first two fights ended in the first round, and yet we only saw two fights in the first about hour and a half.
Right.
I would have liked to seen quicker pacing, but other than that, I was fine with the intro. Again, it did kind of, I will admit, it did kind of lose some of its luster with having half the British team or half the American team not be from either country, with the injuries and whatnot. So I think that kind of lessened a little bit. But the reason I kind of liked it, Dave, because again, you got to do something different from the UFC. You got to try something a little different, even though this is not like a huge fighting thing. But I think it's something neat. Typically, you don't hear the national anthem at MMA events. You don't hear it at the UFC, which is odd. Every other sporting event in this country does. So I thought that was kind of neat. They had them out there. The stage is kind of cool. I thought it was neat. I'll put it that way. Now, do they need it for every single Bellator event, having the guys out there with an anthem? Probably not. But you can at least do the anthem. If it's a really big event, every couple months, maybe bring out the big stage and do that. But yeah, it doesn't need to be done for like every event. I'll put it that way.
Fair enough.
All right, the fights that we at least saw on the main card, the first two fights, I thought, well, the first one was definitely very exciting. Brennan Ward against Curtis Melander. Melander was actually supposed to take on Michael Page. Either way, he still gets finished in the first round, rear naked choke. And I think for Brennan Ward at 170, obviously he used to fight at 185, he looks really good at 170. I know he had a little bit of a setback there against Tamden McRory, who he continues to roll, Dave, now 2-0 under Bellator, as he submitted a very tough fighter in Jason Butcher in the first round via armbar. So Tamden McRory, the barn cat, man, look out for this guy. He's coming back out of nowhere. Also, Matt Bassett, a big win for him on the undercard as well, looking over some of the notable names. But big win for Brendan Ward there, and maybe now we set up a Brendan Ward-Michael Page fight.
Yeah, I believe he called him out in the cage afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. Excuse me. No, Brendan Ward looked good. I would like to see him fight somebody like a Michael Page, simply because the guy that he fought was on short notice, and guy couldn't really prepare for him, and I don't think he's at Ward's level. But let's see him fight a guy that's at his level, because he could be. He's got that one-punch power at 170, so could see a nice little run from Ward coming up.
Linton Vizell against Sokoju was the next fight at 205. I think it's time for Sokoju to retire. Vizell, again, he was good enough to beat Sokoju. He had a really good start against Emmanuel Newton. I think is a guy that is solid here in their 205 division. But yeah, Sokoju is his days of knocking out guys like the likes of Little Nog, I think, are over.
Yeah. Do you happen to notice with all this team stuff that was going on, it took Sokoju like 10 minutes to get dressed or to get undressed for his fight, because he had like the Team USA windbreaker on. He's trying to get all of his stuff off. I was like, come on, man. Somebody ought to help this fella out. But, to me, it's a bad thing when Sokoju's coming to the cage and they're talking about a knockout of, was it Little Nog?
Yeah, he's knocked out. I mean, when he first burst onto the scene, he knocked out quite a few people over Dream and I think maybe towards the tail end of Pride. Let me double check here on his.
When you're talking about knockouts from a guy that took place at least 5 years ago, and that's the best information that you've got,
Yeah, he went 2-1 in some local organizations, including getting knocked out by Glover Teixeira in the WEC. Then he went to Pride and knocked out Little Nog and Ricardo Arona, both in the first round. And then he got in the UFC and only had one victory as he knocked out Kazuhiro Nakayama as he lost to Louise Kane and Leo Machida. He then went on to Dream and Affliction. He knocked out Bob Sapp, but who didn't knock out Bob Sapp? And pretty much kind of since that initial burst, Dave, not having those 2 Pride knockouts, hasn't really been the same guy. And now his record runs to 16-13, and I know he's only 30 years old, Dave, but you could just tell his grappling skills have never been able to catch up to his vicious striking.
Yeah, there's a lot of mileage on those tires.
All right, next fight, Paul Daly against Andre Santos. Of course, Paul Daly was supposed to be fighting Douglas Lima for the Bellator welterweight championship. And while this was an entertaining fight, Dave, both guys definitely left it all out there. Paul Daly, I think, against a guy on short notice, obviously a lesser opponent than Douglas Lima, didn't look as good as I thought he did. Now, Santos' credit, he went in there, he just kind of went guns a-blazing, throwing a lot of bombs, haymakers, trying on the ground with submissions. But for Paul Daly, I thought he was kind of sloppy for some of this fight. He really let Santos, I think, get on him. He let his guard, his head was open for a lot of these. Even though he was landing power shots, he clearly won the fight. But I think if that Paul Daly would have fought Douglas Lima, I think Douglas Lima would have torn him apart on that night in Connecticut.
Yeah. I don't know if it is it a lack of, like, with the opponent change, like just not being interested, but he would have got steamrolled by Lima.
Yeah, because Lima doesn't throw looping shots like that and leaves his head wide open.
No. But
and yeah, it could be because Paul Daly, I mean, he throws bombs, but I would say he's usually more technical than that. He was really leaving his head opening, and that's pretty much Santos' strategy, is trying to get you into the brawl. And I think that played right into Santos' hand, and that's what made that fight a lot closer than I think it should have been.
Yeah, definitely.
For Paul Daly, I think he probably still gets Douglas Lima next. But yeah, like I said, I would have liked to see him take on Andrei Korzhakov. I think that would have been a perfect test. Now for Korzhakov, I don't know if he's going to get a title shot, if he has to fight someone else. But that's a guy I'd like for Bellator to keep if they can. That guy's pretty good.
Yeah, he's got some talent.
All right, King Mo against Chet Congo. The most curious thing about this, Dave, was the split decision that came down to the end. Even though I was not intrigued by this fight, you got to give King Mo some credit. I mean, Chet Congo's a pretty solid heavyweight and a very strong dude in the heavyweight division, and he was taking him down pretty much at will and holding him down. Didn't do a lot of damage, but the fact he was able to take down Congo and pretty much hold him there for the majority of the 3 rounds and not allow those big, powerful kicks and punches to really hit him. A great performance by King Mo, and for Congo, you just got beat soundly by a 205-pound fighter, a guy you were much bigger and stronger than. I think it's time for you to retire as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting booking all the way around. King Mo'd him. I mean, it wasn't the most exciting fight that you've ever seen. King Mo did what he does, and if you're a heavyweight and you got beat by a light heavyweight at his own game, yeah, probably time to go. Maybe you and Sokoju could ride out together. I don't know.
They should do that. Book one more fight, Sokoju versus Congo at an open weight, because obviously Sokoju at 205. Just have him do that. I don't. The loser goes home, retires for good.
Yeah, but the unfortunate part is the winner would stick around.
Oh, no, I didn't think about that. All right, maybe we'll have to rethink this.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the main event of Bellator 134. And I thought this was a really solid fight, especially those first 2 rounds between Emmanuel Newton and Liam McGarry. And once again, Dave, a slow start for Emmanuel Newton. You can make a case that he lost all 3 of the first rounds, or at least 2 of the 3 first round, before once again using his great conditioning and I think just overall heart and determination to really capture those 4th and 5th rounds. As we mentioned, McGarry had never even been past the first round before. So for him to go all the way to the fifth, and I thought McGarry, for a guy who had never been, even into the third, Dave, I thought his conditioning held up very well for a guy that never did it before. It's just Newton is so used to going that distance. He was never going to be at the level of Emmanuel Newton, and Newton just kept on grinding, kept on going for that takedown, kept on working, and I thought securely captured rounds 4 and 5. To me, the round I would curious how everyone getting was how they scored the second. I think that was probably the closest round in my opinion. And whoever you scored the second round is probably who you gave the fight to. And looking at the judges, they scored. I think didn't one judge have it 4 rounds to 1, McGarry?
One judge was way off.
Which I didn't get. I thought there was no way you could give McGarry 4 or 5. I saw it 3-2 McGarry. That's how I had it with Newton coming back and taking the last 2. But close fight, pretty entertaining, and one that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a rematch here pretty soon.
Yeah. I'm not even going to get into the scoring, but what's mildly here, I just looked it up real quick. 48-46, 48-47, 48-47.
Okay.
Were the scores.
So there wasn't a 49-46.
No, 48-46.
That means that was a 9-9 round then? To have 48-46? Because it should be 49. Yeah, okay, so there was a 9. Okay, that's where I misheard. I heard the 46, and I thought, I must not heard the 48. So that means that judge scored a 9-9 round, probably round 2.
No, but it's good. I think it's good that he was able to not able to score points, but to win a fight from the ground. Because I felt like McGarry was doing plenty of work from the bottom, and a lot of times, like Miguel Torres did that in his UFC debut. He lost the fight, but was pretty active on the ground. So, should it become an everyday occurrence that just because you're throwing hammer fists from the bottom you win fights? No. But I thought Liam McGarry did enough and wasn't all that shocked that he came out victorious.
No, great performance, and I think that is something he's been working on. That, all right, I'm probably never going to match some of these guys in wrestling. I'm probably going to get taken down. But if I can train to do anything I can to make them uncomfortable while on top of me, to maybe get back on the feet where I know I'm going to have the advantage, that's what I got to work on. And I think that really showed in this fight. That he is a guy that is very dangerous off his back, not only just with throwing strikes, but his submissions, his long limbs. He's a very hard guy to prepare for, and he's another hard guy to try to bring someone in to emulate him. There are not too many dudes that tall in his weight class. And he's always going to have that advantage over his opponents. And yeah, I think now that he has gone the distance in 25 minutes, and being the young guy, his only 10th professional fight, this is a scary guy to look out for here in the future. Now that he's kind of got this win and performance under him.
What would be a fun fight? It would be a fun fight. Neil Magny against Liam McGarry. That would be fun.
What weight class would that be at?
Aren't they? Oh, he's
Liam McGarry fights at 2. Yeah, I was about to say they'd have to I don't know how much McGarry cuts, but they have to be at 190 or something.
Yeah, as soon as I thought he was at 185. That's my fault. No, but they both have that same advantage where they're both real long for their respective divisions, and that'd be the first fight where it's at this length here.
Speaking of being ridiculously tall, how do you like Kendall Grove against Brandon Halsey for the middleweight title coming up here? Just real quickly.
Is that the next one?
No, the next one is Joe Warren against Marcus Galvo.
No,
but
tell me the names again.
Kendall Grove against Brandon Halsey for the middleweight title. Yeah,
that's not bad. I saw Kendall Grove on Twitter, kind of defending I don't care what Bellator or what you think about what Bellator does. He got all defensive about getting a title shot. Just
I
give
would
me
have
my
liked it.
take
I would
about
have liked the rematch with Shlemenko, but again, it's a name people know, former Ultimate Fighter winner. So
Yeah. It says, poster for my next fight. Haters going to hate. Don't be jealous, homies. The world of MMA nerds. I think he's talking about us.
well, I don't have as much problem with that as I do the Shamrock and Kimbo.
Word.
So either way, I'm sure the winner of that fights probably Shlemenko.
Yeah.
So
Or Kimbo.
no, not Kimbo. All right, let's get to Invicta FC 11, which was this Friday as well from LA on the UFC Fight Pass. Some very nice wins here. A lot of people talking about the Irene Aldana victory as she defeated Colleen Schneider first round rear naked choke. A lot of people talking about that one. As far as overall performance, Alexa Grasso defeated highly touted Mizuki Inoue, who some people had in the top 10 of the 115-pound division, and Grasso was able to take her out in a unanimous decision victory. So she's a fighter to look out for, possibly to the UFC very soon. And also Deanna Bennett, got to give her big ups. She was, in my opinion, Dave, she was probably very close to be taking on Barb Honchak for the Invicta flyweight title, but decided, even with the undefeated record, to try to drop down to 115, I think, to try to get that allure of joining the UFC at one point, and she was able to drop down successfully to 115, something she even admits she wasn't sure she could do, and defeated Norma Center by unanimous decision to run again, keep her record undefeated now at 7-0, and of course the huge main event victory, TKO first round, 46 seconds, Cyborg Santos against Charmaine Tweet. A lot of people not surprised at that, but your thoughts on some of the big victories there at Invicta 11?
Yeah, the one thing I heard you say was something about Barb Honchak. Yeah, I would love to see Barb back in there. It looks like she was in camp with Kat, so it looks like she should be pretty well trained. I know the Invicta has something in April and in July, so I hope she's on one or the other. And we can get her back on, of course. Grasso looked good. She'll probably fight her next fight in the UFC. That Jamie Moyle, I saw her fight before, and I liked her, and then she came across with another finish again. And, I'm not really on the Cyborg train at all. Does she have any victories like via submission, or everything's just TKO, right?
Just about. I can double check here.
I'm looking real quick.
Yeah, 11 knockouts of 13 victories, 2 decisions.
And 1 loss via submission. And it's like, she's bigger and stronger than everybody else at 145 pounds. And, like, that's her talent level. Like, I don't think she's more talented than Charmaine Tweet. She's just bigger and stronger. And, I mean, I guess that has something to be said for, but I think Tweet is a more balanced mixed martial artist. I think half the girls in the UFC could beat Cyborg, but it's just she's so strong and so big. And I don't know. I'm just not on the Cyborg train.
Yeah, I think it's also the thing with steroids as well, and you kind of look at not too many people are fighting at 145. I mean, it's impressive what she's doing. You can't deny that with that level of knockouts. But yeah, it's not the level of competition that is at 135. Definitely, obviously, at 115. So again, Ron has said it. I hate to bring this up, but unless she can get to 135, she's not going to find a lot of validation.
Yep.
And I know she's said on several occasions that her body can't do it, and I get that. I mean, this sport is nothing we're dying over. If you're going to cause yourself that physical harm trying to get to 135 pounds, but I'm just saying that I don't. If she has to really look at her body type to try to get down to 135, because that's the only way she's going to find, I don't know if she cares about the money, but to me, the validation is what Cyborg Santos is seeking, and that's what she has to do to get the validation, because right now it's just not at 145 pounds.
I agree. One quick thing on Invicta. Invicta 11 was good. Invicta 12 is going to be happening in April. Invicta 13 is going to be on July the 10th during the UFC Fan Expo, and it's going to be in Vegas. Your thoughts?
Makes sense. Now, where is the April one scheduled for?
The date has not been announced. If you remember the guy that got me the credentials, that's Ariel's producer on the MMA Hour. That's New York Rick. He's the PR guy for Invicta. He said to a venue announcement in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I would say I like this trend of Invicta going to where a big UFC fight is, on Saturday, and them going the night before. I think that's a great idea. And looking at April, I don't know if they're willing to go to Canada, but obviously there's the fight in Montreal, and also there's the big UFC on Fox in Newark, in New Jersey.
Right.
So if they're looking to kind of do that same thing, which now they did here in LA, you said they're going to do it for the Fan Expo coming up in July. I would say either one of those events, makes sense to kind of have the one the day before.
Yep, I like it.
And I'm holding out for New Jersey because, as some listeners know, I already booked my ticket and flight to Newark, New Jersey to see UFC on Fox 15. So I'm holding out that they announce it for Friday night, so I can see Invicta on Friday and the UFC on Saturday. So that'd be a nice bonus.
What day is your show?
April 18th. So
April 10th is the next Invicta.
Oh, they already said it's going to be the 10th?
Wah, wah, wah.
Well, maybe they'll move it back a week.
Like, oh, Jim Graham's going to be there. What happened?
I think your screen cut out there.
I'm there.
So, yeah, it froze up and then was all technical and digital and stuff.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Got some lag. Anyways, yeah, so they're not moving it for when I'm going to be there, but oh well, would have been nice. All right, let's get to UFC 184 from Los Angeles, California. 5 fights were shown on the main card, and the first fight of the evening at 155 pounds, Tony Ferguson against Gleison Tibau. I know Tibau was taking on this fight on somewhat short notice, Dave, but Tibau, despite having I think, what we say, 16-8 coming into this fight in the UFC, this was his 25th fight.
Right.
He's a guy that hasn't got finished that often, even in his 8 losses. If you go back and look, I believe he's only been finished in terms of by knockout twice, and he has only been submitted once over 24 fights in the UFC. So regardless of short notice, the fact that Tony Ferguson was able to go out there and finish Gleison Tibau in the first round with a rear naked choke, Tibau being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, this is an awfully big victory for Tony Ferguson, who now I believe runs 4 in a row here in the UFC in his most recent streak, and so far in the organization has actually 5 in a row rather, and he's won 8 of his 9 fights in the octagon. His only loss was to Michael Johnson, which now doesn't look too bad, but Tony Ferguson is a guy, Dave, I think that is ready for a top 10 opponent.
Yeah, I think he was fired up because Coach Lesnar was there. Brock Lesnar, who was his coach on The Ultimate Fighter, he had shown up to the event and pumped him up. But yeah, Tony Ferguson, he's been brought along very slow and calculated, and he's done everything that the UFC's asked. He's finishing fights. He's finishing fights against, high-level guys. And, yeah, I mean, I think the time, to go with what they say, the time is now They have moved him up to number 13 in these terrible UFC rankings.
Well, I believe we have him just outside the top 10. We just updated our rankings, facebook.com/ Beyond the Cage podcast. You can check out on the notes section. We just updated our rankings for March. Tony Ferguson is now on our contenders list, but obviously we do everyone in MMA at 155 pounds, not just specifically the UFC. So we got a guy like Will Brooks on there. But we did, speaking of Michael Johnson, he is now in the top 10 with his victory over Edson Barboza. But we see Tony Ferguson get added to the contenders. So, yeah, just outside the top 10. But if he could take on someone kind of there in that bottom range, even though they're not currently ranked, Bobby Green's nice. Edson Barbosa's a nice matchup. Miles Jury's a good matchup. I think Josh Thompson got hurt. Otherwise, I think that'd be a good matchup. Obviously, it looks like Habib's going to be fighting Donald Cerrone. Who knows what Ben Henderson's going to be doing? I think Ben Henderson would be a great matchup for Ferguson, but if Ben's content on staying at 170, then that kind of maybe throw that out. He might be a little higher. He might be garnering somebody else, but I wouldn't even be opposed to a matchup. Some people think it might be too quick, but I think him against Gilbert Melendez would be a very interesting fight.
Yeah, there's plenty of good fights at lightweight, plenty of them.
And also, you can even throw in a rematch with Michael Johnson.
Yeah, does he even have a fight scheduled, or he just fought, right?
Yeah, Michael Johnson just fought too.
Yeah, you could. A week before he fought. You're absolutely right.
I'm sure both of them wouldn't be opposed to that.
No.
So, big win for Tony Ferguson. Let's head into our next fight here in the welterweight division. We'll have some news to talk about this one of these gentlemen afterwards, as Richard Walsh took on Alan Joe Boy. And Dave, I think we were kind of right. This was going to be a close matchup. Both guys tough, big, strong welterweights, and this was a really nice start to this fight. But then kind of in a moment up against the cage, Joe Boy saw the opportunity for a big Muay Thai elbow, took it, and that kind of was the beginning of the end for the Australian Richie Walsh, as Joe Boy was able to go and pretty much finish it after the elbow. I think he threw a couple more, then Big John stepped in at 2:19 in the first round to stop this one. And I would have maybe liked to see it go on a little longer, but for what we saw, it was a very exciting matchup. And I think after all that controversy that Joe Boy had in Brazil, to come back to now where he lives and trains the majority of the time in LA and get a win on the main card like that, very nice victory there for Alan Joe Boy.
Yeah, another solid victory for Joe Boy. When he wins, it looks pretty. It always looks good when he wins. He's a very, very good striker. He's got a couple of losses. It seems like the longer the fight goes, the less chance that he has to win is what it seems like. His striking is very good. You can't argue that. But the wrestling and the groundwork have a lot to be desired. Speaking of groundwork,
are you going to be going ahead and transition to Mr. Joe Boy's next opponent?
Yes. UFC Fight Night 68-ish?
Sounds about right.
Oh, it is 68. It says it right there. Huh. Total guess. UFC Fight Night 68 down in New Orleans. This card is currently loaded with Cormier Bader, Rothwell Mitrione, Boach Dan Henderson, Joe Proctor, Justin Edwards, Derek Lewis and Sean Jordan, and Alan Joubuen and his new opponent, Brian the Bad Boy Ebersol.
For those of you who don't know, I don't know if it was widely known, but at least known to me and you, Dave, Brian was going to fight on that card in Louisiana. And after this fight, Joe Boy said he would love to fight in his home state of Louisiana. So the UFC goes, hey, we have Brian Ebersol going to fight on that card. Doesn't have an opponent yet. Joe Boy wants to fight in his home state. Both are welterweights. Boom. Matchup was done like 2 days later.
It's good. I've been reading online, of course, everybody says that Joe Buen's a very dangerous striker, and he is. I'll say this much. Joe Buen is not a more dangerous striker than Rick Story or Hector Lombard
or John Howard
or John Howard or Chris Lytle. And Brian was able to neutralize all of those people. So,
and more importantly, not get knocked out by any of those gentlemen.
Yeah. I mean, win or lose, I just don't think that Joe Buen, it's pretty devastating striking when you see him knock guys out. But I just think that, obviously early predictions, I think Brian should be able to neutralize that with Brian's ground skills. Hopefully, once Brian gets back to the States, we'll be able to ask him about it.
Real quickly, before we get to the next fight, I just want to mention on the undercard, he had some big victories. Derek Lewis, obviously you mentioned he'll be fighting Sean Jordan, but the reason he got such a good opponent, he dominated Juan Potts, knocking him out in the second round. How about Tim Means knocking out Diego Lima in the first round? Big ups to Tim Means. His move up to 170. He had a very close fight against Neil Magny. Now I believe he's won 2 fights in a row by knockout. Tim Means, that guy's pretty good. And also, unfortunately, our good friend James Krause, who we got to interview up ahead of this fight, he had a very close fight and a very entertaining fight against Valmer Lazaro. But just wasn't able to get that takedown. 0 for 10 on the takedowns, and I think when you look at that and the striking was pretty even, the judges ended up going the way of Lazaro there in that split decision. And also you had Ken Yamamoto return to the UFC against Roman Salazar. That fight ended up going down as a no contest. So unfortunately, Kid Yamamoto's return not as successful. And also a big win by Juan Canero, I believe, I forgot he's Brazilian, as he decimated Mark Munoz. And I know Munoz was talking about getting on the card in the Philippines, him being the Filipino wrecking machine and all, but
not after that.
I don't think Mark Munoz has much left. I think he's now lost 4 in a row, and he's gotten finished in the first round in 3 of those. The wrecking machine, his days maybe just being a coach there at Team Rain. Maybe that's all left. And also speaking about retiring, I think it's definitely time for Josh Koscheck to hang it up, as he got submitted in the second round in the next fight at UFC 184 to Jake Ellenberger. And nice bounce back win for Jake Ellenberger. We saw a little bit of the old Ellenberger, saw some things clicking more, but Josh Koscheck, not the same guy that remember, throwing a lot of bombs, being able to land power takedowns, land a lot of damage and guard. He just seemed really tentative, and then kind of in that second round he got tagged with I think just one right, and just kind of you could tell was already ready to kind of turtle up, and he didn't really offer Ellenberger much. And I think obviously you said in the warm up to this fight, Dave, he's living in his mansion and stuff. Obviously he doesn't need the money, so I don't think we'll be seeing Josh Koscheck anymore in the UFC.
No, he's absolutely fine with his money. He now it's more of a pride thing. I don't mean Pride FC. I mean Pride.
Hi, bro.
So,
what was that?
I'm a god.
So,
I'm the god.
All right. Sorry about that. There, someone decided to try to hijack this call. Anyways, go ahead there, Dave.
I was, I'm baffled, Jim. We have Jake Ellenberger just outside of the top 10, and I think that that's fair. It's driving me nuts. Jake Ellenberger and Neil Magny, I think, would have been a perfect fight for them to make. Jake Ellenberger's on a roll. I know it's like the 5th time I mentioned it, but it drives me nuts because that's a perfect fight. And remember, I'm starting to get irritated with all these rankings that the UFC is doing. This is based off people's pay in like 5 short months. And you mean to tell me that Kelvin Gastelum, Gunnar Nelson, Thiago Alves, and Ryan LaFleur should be ranked ahead of Neil Magny? I mean, to me, I think that's a perfect fight. If Ellenberger beats Magny, that puts Ellenberger right back into contention, or vice versa. But I digress.
No, completely right. The co-main event of the evening was in the women's bantamweight division as highly touted prospect Holly Holm took on Raquel Pennington. And I think our pick, Dave, we both picked Raquel Pennington. Even though she didn't win, I think was justified. A lot of people thought Holly Holm was just going to run over Raquel Pennington, but that was not the case. As you look at the final striking numbers, Raquel Pennington actually outstruck Holm slightly in landed strikes, 51-48.
Isn't that ridiculous?
She was 0 for 5 on takedowns, but Holm was the more active fighter as she threw 214 strikes to just 150 by Pennington. And I think maybe that activeness, maybe a little more diversity in her strikes. It seemed like Pennington was just kind of throwing hands. Holm was throwing a variety of different kicks, seemed to be moving forward more, and obviously shut down the takedown. Very close fight. I think Holm I would have gave the first. I think Pennington I would have gave the third for sure. Round 2 was awful close. I mean, I could have actually, honestly, Dave, seen that scored a 9-9. This fight very easily could have been a draw. It ended up going down a split decision, but very close fight. I think it was nice that Holm got a fight under her belt because obviously that Holm that fought on that night would have definitely not beat Ronda Rousey, and I think that fight also proved that she is not ready for Ronda yet.
No. No. Holly Holm got outstruck by Raquel Pennington. Let that sink in for a second. Like, Doug was here, a bunch of guys were over here, and I had put a parlay on Kat and Raquel to make some money, and I honestly thought I had a chance with Raquel when they started reading the scorecards. Holly Holm's supposed to be the next big thing. I don't see it. There may be nerves there, but, you know, she stopped a few takedowns and stuff, but yikes. To me, it seems like there's a lot of work to be done with Holly Holm. What I would like to see next for her is Holly Holm versus Marion Renault. You like that fight?
Yes, she is fresh off her victory over Jessica Andrade. So that would be a good one. I also wouldn't be opposed to seeing Holm against Amanda Nunes or a Betch Kahea.
No, we'll get into Betch Kahea. I've already figured this out, so you really don't need to even have an opinion for like the next 10 minutes. I've already got it all mapped out.
All right, but yeah, Holm definitely will need another fight before she gets a shot at the title. But I think Pennington, I think a lot of people, like I said, were underestimating her. But I think even in loss, I think that elevates her status. I think even a loss really helps out Pennington. And I think she actually gets a high-profile opponent for her next fight as well. Maybe a Sarah McMahon who's coming off a loss, or an Alexis Davis.
Yeah.
So, all right, main event, Dave. Obviously, I know, as everyone knows, listeners of the show, friend and fan of Kat Zingano. It didn't go her way, but everyone hasn't had to go her way when they fought Ronda Rousey. Obviously, the quickness, I don't think people were expecting. Going back to my breakdown, I remember saying, when Kat gets taken down, what will happen? What will she do to defend that? And she did get taken down. And to be honest, I think it's a move that Ronda did there with the legs kind of sweeping around and get the back. That is not a very conventional move and a very impressive move, and obviously a move that she's practiced enough that I think it was just muscle memory, because in that quick a time, that's a very hard thing to think, react, and do. Her body just knows how to do that. She's been practicing that move a lot, and she just instinctively knew to go around and sweep and how to get that armbar, and that was all she wrote. I think a rematch will probably be somewhere down the line eventually, but I think they're going to have Ronda take on a couple more contenders first before we see more rematches. But it just shows you how impressive Ronda Rousey is, that no matter what the situation is, it just seems like she knows where to put herself in a position to get a finish. It's incredible to watch.
I can respect what Ronda's done. The finish that she had is a lot of luck. In my mind, it's a lot of luck because if that situation is reversed and Kat lands that same armbar, everybody's screaming for an immediate rematch. That was luck, that type of stuff. Ronda's the armbar wizard. Like, she can do it to anybody, right? But Kat went in, attempted a flying knee. Nobody else has charged at her, and they didn't win. So she tried something different, right? Basically kind of tripped and fell into her, and Ronda was able to bridge that over, which that's a judo move. And it just so happened the way that she fell, and then Kat left her hand there. She made a simple mistake, and she got caught. And if I could go to Team Genesis with Doug Keith, if I could charge at Doug, if that's a skill, then after Doug watches that tape a couple times, he should be able to throw me in that same armbar. And I don't think that's possible. It's impressive that she was able to get it in 14 seconds. And these people are saying that Misha's a better fighter than Kat because she pushed Ronda the farthest. Are we really making contenders out of who lasted the longest? For lack of a better term, who gives a shit how long you lasted? Kat lasted 14 seconds, made $100,000, and can fight next week. Misha went 2.5 rounds and still lost. What's the difference? You still lost. When I hear that stuff, that's so ignorant that she's better because she lasted longer.
It would be somewhat of a case, Dave, if Kat Zingano didn't fight Miesha Tate, but they did fight, and Kat knocked her out.
Did you hear on the weigh-in show?
So
they asked Miesha.
That argument is irrelevant.
They said
about lasting longer.
They said, "Hey, Miesha, who hits harder, Kat or Ronda?" And she said, "Ronda." What? You got knocked out by Kat Zingano.
I don't know. I mean, that she would be the only one that would know, having only fought both. So, I mean, there are very few people who can answer that question. So it's personal opinion, and she may be just saying that. Just who knows? It doesn't really matter.
Okay, so I have two trains of thought for you. If Ronda's not making a movie, which it seems like she is, if she's not, what's that?
Which should be for the fall. She should be obviously 14 seconds. She should be good to go. Anytime before September.
No, in the press conference, it sounded like she was leaving to make a movie. She'll be back in the fall.
Oh, okay. I heard that she was filming in the fall and needed to fight quick.
So, here's my thing. The UFC's updated their rankings. We've updated ours. Kat doesn't fall out from number 1. Misha's hurt. Why is the rematch not possible now?
It is possible, but they may be looking to other avenues.
Okay, now I'm going to go to the other avenues for you. Jessica Evil Eye has been on our show. She's a great interview. She is awesome. She is 1-1 with a drug failure. Regardless of how great of an interview she is and how great she hooked us up with, she's 1-1, and she failed a drug test to get the no contest. She won a fight via doctor stoppage, which it's not. I mean, it's a victory, just like losing in 14 seconds is a loss. I mean, it's not something Jessica went into the fight thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get a doctor stoppage and get out of there," you know. Me, personally, I like the Holm-Renault fight. The Betch Correia and Jessica I think those two should fight to get into the contendership And if you're gonna do a number one contender, do Kat and Misha again. Because right now, I believe isn't is Davis getting ready to fight McMahon? Isn't that the fight that's coming up?
I believe so, because both are coming off of losses, so that would make sense to me.
Yeah, I think Davis and McMahon are getting ready to fight. So everybody, this is one of those situations where I'm not saying it because I want Kat in the title shot. They need Jessica Ai and Bethe Correia both could steamroll through Ronda Rousey. That's a distinct possibility. That could happen. But neither one of them have beat anybody that you're like, wow, they beat them. You know what I mean? Like, let's make an actual number one contender for Ronda Rousey. If she's not coming back till December, you have nothing but time to make an actual number one contender.
Well, like I said, we have conflicting things. I thought she was filming in the fall and needed a quick fight. You're saying that she is filming now and would return in the fall. Either way, I guess it looks as though she's only going to fight one more time this year, that being Ronda Rousey. Now, if it's a quick fight, if they have to pick somebody, Dave, to do it quick, which obviously shortens, the timetable for a number one contender, my odds-on favorite is Jessica Ai. They've really been bringing her along to different events and promoting her. If they had to pick someone, that's who I'm guessing. But if it's the scenario you were talking about where she wouldn't return until, say, September, October, then I like Ai against Bethe Correia. In my opinion, I would like to see Jessica get one more win because, like you said, it was a doctor stoppage, and it was against Leslie Smith, who moved back up to 135 pounds. It was on the undercard. I'd like for them to put Jessica against somebody on a May card, get her some great notoriety, get her opponent great notoriety to really build up her, in the case of this matchup we were talking about, Bethe Correia, build them up as the next person to take on Ronda. Because I feel like right now, booking either one of those two, it doesn't hold as much weight, and it's not as sexy as Ngannou Rousey, and I don't think would be as worthy of main eventing a card by itself. That's my thoughts on it. Yeah. And again, we're saying this as huge fans of Jessica Ai.
I mean, yeah, and I don't want that to be misconstrued, and I'm not angry or anything, but in the build-up to 184, they can. There's a story that they can build with Kat about, she won. She wasn't supposed to beat Miesha Tate. She was supposed to be on the Ultimate Fighter. She lost that. She lost her husband. Dana told her she was irrelevant. Blah 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 blah. All this stuff. That's a story that people can get behind. You know what I mean? Like, you can be like, man. And then when she lost, she was in the cage like, oh my God, I cannot believe that just happened. Like, there's a story that can be built there. Jessica's 1-1-1 in the UFC. What are you going to show me leading up to UFC 188 or whatever? What are you going to show me to where, like, you can show footage of how great Jessica is and how great of a shot that she has? Now put her in there against Bethe Correia, and those two throw down and they're bleeding all over the place. Now you got yourself some footage, because people aren't going to tune in to Jessica Ai, Ronda Rousey based on what's in front of us right now. I don't think they're going to tune in to Bethe Correia, Ronda Rousey with the way the landscape is right now. There's all these other storylines when Ronda fights. When it was McMahon, it was bronze medalist. When it was Kat, it was this. She hates Miesha. It was all these different things about all of her opponents. And right now, as we sit, Jessica Ai and Bethe Correia don't have that. And just to go back real quick, too, UFC 186 has Alexis Davis and Sarah Kaufman on it.
That's a good rematch. We actually got to see that fight, I believe, on the undercard of Tate Rousey 1. Davis McMahon. That was a great fight, so that should be a good one.
It's one of those, Jim, where I love the bantamweight division. I think the top 8 people in that division are great, and the fights can be promoted. But putting them on Fox Sports 1 before a big, UFC 186 is Dillashaw Barao, Mighty Mouse's title defense, Rampage, Bisbing, and then Davis and Kaufman is on the undercard. Those are people that are almost in line for a title shot. Those girls should be the co-main event of a Fox show. And let them get the rub of free TV to where people are like, oh, Jessica and Betch, they should, is the card you're going to the Fox card?
Yes.
All right, that one's already full. But, like, the one in July is in Chicago. That's kind of a long time. But if there's one in between there, let them co-main event a card like that to get their name out there and get the notoriety that you were speaking about. I mean, we know who Jessica I is. Go to your mall. There's a YouTube video, Jim, where you walking around Detroit asking people their knowledge of Detroit sports or whatever. I've seen it like on our YouTube channel or your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Go to your local mall and ask people who Jessica I is. You know, and like I said, I love Jessica I, but they don't know who she is, and I'm just ranting, but
No.
I mean that's what the problem is. They have to build these girls up.
All right, well, before we end the show, for those of you, some of our friends on Facebook may already know, but I wanted to throw it out now. We are officially going to do another contest here for some signed merchandise. And to do that, right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast, we're trying to get to 100 YouTube subscribers. Currently, we're at 83. So all we need is 17 subscribers to start this contest. And if you're wondering, well, what's in it for me, Jim? What's in it for me? Well, speaking to Jessica, we were just talking about her.
What's in it for me?
Right there. That is a signed photo from Jessica I. You could win that. Her training partner, Stipe Miocic, signed photo. You could possibly win that. She's going to be fighting on the main card of UFC on Fox that I will see in New Jersey. Paige Van Zandt. You could win that. And we're going to have another prize. We're going to have a mystery pack of UFC cards, including at least one autograph card. So we have those are 3 prizes coming up.
Say
If
what?
we get to 100 YouTube subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to our channel right here, youtube.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast. Tell your friends. Once we get to 100, we'll do a contest for those 3 prizes I just showed you.
Hey, Jim, for our loyal listeners who are still there, our sponsors from Fight Chicks, I just got an email from Jake and Elizabeth, and they just came back from LA. Obviously, they were out there. Big weekend in women's MMA. They were at Invicta and 184. If you go on FightChicks.com, order some shirts, some apparel, whatever you'd like to get there, use the code CHIX20, CHIX20 at checkout to get 20% off your order. How about that?
And also, I just received email confirmation we will be talking to Darren Cruikshank today.
We is a relative term. I will be at work.
Probably not. It's set for 2:30 Eastern.
Ooh, maybe.
So,
We'll
all right.
see.
Anyways, we're going to talk to Darren Cruikshank. Someone's going to talk to Darren Cruikshank today on behalf of Beyond the Cage. So, any final thoughts, Dave?
No.
All right. Well, he is the Juice Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter he might have some thoughts later at Vigilante Juice. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. Thanks again to our partners, as Dave mentioned, Fight Chicks, as well as TopRatedMMA.com, MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca, Bluegrass MMA, MMA Signatures USA.com as well. You can check out the show again, YouTube, the audio version as well, which will include that interview of Darren Cruikshank on iTunes and the Stitcher platform as well. For the Juice Dave Sadler, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.